My name is Elara Monroe, 26 years old. The morning sunlight slanted through the tall windows of Brian's bedroom, golden rays gliding across the polished hardwood floors like liquid fire. I remember thinking how cruel it looked, how light could feel so mocking when my world was about to split open. My hands trembled as I clutched a glossy white card, its gold lettering blurring as my eyes filled with tears. For a second, I thought I must be hallucinating, my mind fabricating some absurd nightmare. But no, the words remained the same, sharp and merciless. Brian Pedro Hendricks and Sophia Elizabeth Hartwell request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony. Saturday, October 14th, 2025. St. Mary's Cathedral. 2:00 p.m. 2 days. 2 days from now, the man I had devoted 4 years of my life to would be walking down the aisle with someone else. I couldn't breathe. My chest caved in as though invisible hands were squeezing the life out of me. My pulse roared in my ears, each beat like the pounding of a war drum. The card slipped from my trembling fingers, fluttering soundlessly to the floor. It landed like a dying butterfly, fragile and mocking at once. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the edge of Brian's immaculate bed, clutching the invitation again as though holding it tighter might change the words. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood cologne, his scent, woven into the sheets I had washed only 2 days ago. For 4 years, I had cleaned this room, cooked his meals, folded his laundry, planned a future around his vague promises. And all the while, he had been planning this. The betrayal felt surreal, too sharp to comprehend. A sound broke the silence, the faint click of the front door. My entire body stiffened. Brian's footsteps echoed in the hallway, firm and unhurried, as if he had nothing to hide. My throat felt raw, though I hadn't made a sound. Slowly, mechanically, I rose to my feet, the wedding invitation clutched like damning evidence in my fist. When he appeared in the doorway, his gym clothes damp with sweat, his dark hair mussed just so, he looked like the man I loved. The man I had once believed was my destiny. His handsome face softened when he saw me, though confusion flickered in his eyes. But then his gaze dropped to the card in my hands, and in an instant, something in his expression shifted, like a mask cracking. Gone was the warmth, replaced by a flicker of calculation. "Brian." My voice was a whisper, hoarse, desperate. "What is this?" For a moment, he didn't answer. He set the 2 coffee cups he carried onto the dresser, his movements deliberate, too careful, buying time. Then, when he turned back to me, his face was blank, unreadable. "Where did you find that?" His tone was flat. "Under your bed," my voice cracked, "while I was cleaning, like I always do." My chest heaved as I lifted the invitation higher. "So tell me, explain to me how you're marrying someone named Sophia in 2 days, when you've been telling me for years that we would get married soon." For a heartbeat, I thought he might falter, that he might rush forward, wrap me in his arms, confess some terrible misunderstanding. But instead, Brian chuckled, low, bitter, and dismissive. The sound sliced through me. "Elara, did you really think I'd marry someone like you?" The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air like smoke, acrid and poisonous, until they sank in. My body recoiled as if he had physically struck me. "What?" The word left my lips like a child's plea, fragile and breaking. He gestured lazily around the room, his eyes scanning the sleek furniture, the skyline view, the expensive life he curated. Then his gaze returned to me, raking over my rumpled pajamas, my tear-streaked face. "Look at this place. Look at my life. Do you honestly believe I'd tie myself down to a coffee shop girl who can barely make rent?" Each word landed like a blade, sharp and deliberate. My legs wobbled, my stomach churned. I had cooked for him, cleaned for him, worshipped him. And this was what I was worth to him? "But you said you loved me," I whispered. The words cracked like glass. He shrugged. "I said what you needed to hear. You were convenient, Elara, always there when I wanted company, always eager to please. But marriage?" His smile twisted cruelly. "Marriage is about building power, reputation. That was never going to happen with you." His words gutted me. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger whose eyes held no remorse. "Who is she?" I demanded, though my voice shook. Brian straightened, pride swelling in his chest. "Sophia. Someone appropriate. Her father owns 3 luxury hotels. She's Columbia educated, refined, from my world. She's the kind of woman a man like me marries. I stared at him, the edges of my vision swimming. And what am I? He smirked. You're the kind of woman a man like me keeps around, until he finds someone better. My breath caught. My heart clenched, breaking in jagged silence. I stumbled back, but the walls closed in, leaving me trapped in the room where my love had died. I loved you, I whispered. The sound of my own voice disgusted me, weak, pitiful. No, Brian said coldly, turning toward his closet as though I were already irrelevant. You love the fantasy. You love the idea of marrying up, escaping your tiny life. But you were never enough. Something inside me snapped. Rage trembled under the surface of my grief, but I had no strength to wield it. He had stripped me bare with words sharper than knives. Get out, Brian ordered without looking at me. Leave your key on the counter. I have a bachelor party tonight. A bachelor party. While I had been building castles of dreams in my mind, he had been preparing for a celebration of my erasure. My legs carried me to the doorway in a daze. At the threshold, I paused. A small, ridiculous hope flickered. Maybe he'd call me back, apologize, break down in remorse. Instead, he was scrolling through his phone, his lips curving into a faint smile at whatever message had just arrived. Elara. His voice rang out casually, just as I turned the corner. I froze. Yes? My voice cracked. Leave the key, don't forget. I don't remember leaving his apartment. I don't remember driving across the city in my battered Honda. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the floor of my tiny studio, pajamas still clinging to me, my face swollen from tears. The wedding invitation lay beside me like a corpse, its gold letters blurred by the flood of tears that wouldn't stop. The silence of my apartment pressed against me, suffocating. 4 years. Gone. My heart fractured into splinters, each one sharper than the last. I pressed my palms to my chest as though I could hold myself together, but all I could think of was his voice, cold and unyielding. You were never enough. The words carved into me deeper than any blade ever could. And still, through the sobs, through the suffocating pain, a tiny ember of something else flickered. Anger. Humiliation. Something that whispered, "Not yet, Elara. This story isn't over." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, his words replayed in my head, cruel and deliberate, until they burned like acid in my veins. You're the kind of woman a man like me keeps around until he finds someone better. He hadn't even flinched when he said it. No hesitation, no guilt, just cold, casual truth. By the time dawn bled through the blinds of my tiny studio, I felt hollowed out. I lay curled on the floor, still in yesterday's pajamas, the wedding invitation on the carpet beside me like a weapon I didn't know how to disarm. I tried to remember the first time Brian had said I love you. The memory felt like a cruel joke now. His voice warm, his arms strong around me, his lips brushing against my hair. I had believed it. God, I had built my life around it. But last night, that illusion shattered. And now, every I love you felt like a counterfeit bill. Something worthless, something dangerous if you tried to spend it. My phone buzzed around 9 a.m., dragging me back from the spiral. His name flashed on the screen. Brian. I froze, my stomach twisting. Why was he calling? Had he changed his mind? Was he going to apologize, beg for forgiveness, admit it had all been a terrible mistake? Against my better judgment, my thumb hovered over answer. When I finally pressed it, his voice was calm, almost bored. Elara, did you leave the key on the counter? For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat burned, my chest caved in again. That was why he'd called, not to apologize, not to explain, but to make sure I'd followed his orders like an obedient servant. You destroyed me, I whispered into the receiver. 4 years, Brian. 4 years of my life, and you throw me away like I'm nothing. And you think that's just something I'll accept? He sighed, impatient, as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. You're being dramatic. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder? My voice rose, shaking. You lied to me every single day. You promised me a future while you planned another one behind my back. Harder? Brian, you gutted me. There was silence on the line. Then his voice came back, clipped and dismissive. Look, Elara, it was fun while it lasted. You got what you wanted, nice clothes, fancy dinners, a taste of a better life, but it was never permanent. Don't delude yourself. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles whitened. You used me, I spat. Convenience, he corrected smoothly. That's what it was. You were comfortable. But Sophia is a different league. She belongs in my world. You never did. His words were like knives, carving away the last fragments of hope I hadn't realized I was still clinging to. I wanted to scream, to tell him I hated him, that he would regret this, that love wasn't a game of status. But the words tangled in my throat. "Goodbye, Elara," he said flatly. "Do yourself a favor. Don't embarrass yourself by showing up at the wedding. Security will be tight." The line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, my reflection ghostly in the black glass. My chest heaved with shallow breaths. He hadn't just broken my heart. He'd trampled on it, then laughed at the pieces. But beneath the despair, a strange calm began to take root. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't resignation. It was something darker, something sharper. He thought he had won. He thought I was powerless, small, irrelevant. But he had underestimated me. Later that afternoon, I forced myself to leave the apartment. My legs felt like lead as I walked through the streets, blending into the Saturday crowd. I ducked into a quiet cafe, not Moonbeam, not anywhere I might bump into coworkers who would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. I ordered tea, though I barely tasted it, and sat by the window watching strangers pass by. Each couple that laughed together, each family that walked hand in hand, felt like a taunt. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, whispering to myself, "Don't fall apart here, not in public." "Elara?" I jerked up at the sound of my name. Across the table, Angela slid into the seat opposite me, her eyes scanning my face. God, I hadn't even noticed her approach. Angela had been my best friend since high school, the only one who had dared to question Brian openly. Where others saw his charm and success, she had seen the cracks, the evasions, the arrogance. And now, one look at me told her everything. "Elara," her voice softened, breaking. "It's true, isn't it? Something happened." I didn't mean to cry. I'd promised myself I wouldn't, but the second I saw her, the tears spilled, hot and uncontrollable. My hand shook as I shoved the invitation across the table. Angela picked it up, her face hardening as her eyes scanned the words. When she looked up again, her jaw was tight, her fists clenched around the card. "That bastard," she hissed. "That absolute piece of garbage." I covered my face with my hands, muffling the sob that tore through me. "Angela, I'm so stupid. You tried to warn me. Everyone did. And I still believed him. I still loved him." Her hands reached across the table, gripping mine firmly. "No. Don't you dare blame yourself. You're not stupid, Elara. You're not weak. You loved him, and he exploited that. That makes him a monster, not you a fool." I shook my head, gasping through the tears. What am I supposed to do now? He's getting married in 2 days, and I'm sitting here in a cafe crying over someone who never even loved me. Angela's eyes flashed with fire. "No, you're not just going to sit here. He doesn't get to do this to you and walk away smiling. No, Elara, we're not going to let him." Her words startled me. I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Angela leaned closer, her voice low, steady, almost dangerous. "Brian Hendress thinks he can humiliate you, discard you like trash, and still have his perfect wedding. But what if his perfect day didn't go as planned? What if his lies finally caught up with him?" I froze, my pulse quickening. "Angela, are you saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted, her grip on my hands tightening, "that Sophia deserves to know the truth, and Brian deserves to face the consequences of what he did to you." I stared at her, torn between fear and the flicker of something that felt suspiciously like hope. The thought of standing up to him, of exposing his betrayal in front of everyone he wanted to impress, it terrified me. But it also thrilled me. For the first time since yesterday, the idea of being more than just his discarded secret took shape in my mind. Angela's eyes held mine, unwavering. "He thinks he broke you, Elara. Prove him wrong." And just like that, the ember inside me ignited into flame. The hours after my conversation with Angela blurred into one long haze of tears and silence. When she left the cafe, she made me promise to call if the darkness became too much, but I couldn't bring myself to speak again. I walked home in a trance, the city noise muffled as though I were underwater. Inside my studio, I sank back onto the floor where I had spent most of the night, the crumpled invitation still on the carpet like a viper poised to strike. Every glance at it made my stomach twist. I wanted to burn it, tear it, shred it into confetti. But some stubborn part of me refused. That piece of cardstock was evidence, the proof that my heartbreak wasn't a figment of imagination. When evening fell, I tried to eat. I managed half a piece of toast before gagging. My reflection in the bathroom mirror startled me. Swollen eyes, blotchy skin, hair in tangles. I looked like a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. I pressed my palms against the sink and whispered, "Who am I, if not his?" The question gutted me. For 4 years, Brian had been my axis, my anchor, my future. Without him, I was adrift, unmoored. But wasn't that the cruelest irony? He had convinced me to revolve around him, only to throw me out of orbit when he found someone brighter. The weight of self-blame pressed harder. Maybe I had been foolish. Maybe I had ignored the signs, the secret phone calls, the endless delays about setting a date, the way he had never once introduced me to his parents, his colleagues, his so-called friends. I'd excused it all in the name of patience and loyalty, but patience had turned into blindness. Blindness had turned into chains. And now, those chains were cutting deep into my skin. When my phone buzzed again, I nearly ignored it, but the name flashing on the screen jolted me. Clayton. My brother. I hesitated, then answered, my voice a cracked whisper. "Hey." "Elara?" His tone was immediately sharp. "What's wrong with your voice? Have you been crying?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "That obvious, huh?" "Tell me what happened." I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. For years, I'd hidden Brian from my family. It wasn't that I was ashamed. I'd thought I was protecting what we had, keeping it sacred. But deep down, maybe I knew. Maybe I feared what they'd say if they saw the cracks. Now there was no hiding left. So I told him everything. From the silver ring Brian had slipped onto my finger years ago with promises of forever, to the cruel dismissal in his voice that morning when he told me I was never enough. By the time I finished, my throat was raw and my face was wet again. On the other end of the line, Clayton was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with rage. "I'm going to kill him." "No." I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. "You're not. He isn't worth it." "Elara, he stole 4 years from you. He lied to you, used you, humiliated you. He deserves to face the truth," I interrupted. "Not fists. Consequences." There was another pause, then his voice softened. "What do you want me to do?" I stared at the invitation still lying on the floor. 2 days. In 48 hours, Brian would be standing in front of hundreds of people, vowing loyalty to a woman who didn't know she was marrying a liar. My hands curled into fists. "I need you to help me make sure his wedding doesn't happen the way he planned." Clayton let out a low whistle. "Sis, are you sure?" "No." My voice cracked, but grew steadier. "But I can't sit back and let him win. I can't let her, Sophia, walk into the same trap I did." "Then I'm in," he said immediately. "Whatever you need, Elara, whatever it takes." That night, Angela came over, armed with takeout and a fire in her eyes. She listened quietly as I told her about Clayton's support, nodding with approval. "Good," she said. "We'll need all the backup we can get." "We?" I blinked at her. "Angela, I can't drag you into this mess." Her laugh was sharp. "Drag me in? Elara, I've been waiting for this day for years. I told you he was poison, and now you finally see it. You think I'm going to sit on the sidelines while he marries rich and walks away scot-free? No, I'm with you, to the bitter end." Her conviction steadied me more than she realized. For the first time since discovering the invitation, I felt the faintest flicker of control return. We spent hours talking, sketching out half-baked ideas on scraps of paper. How could we confront him? When? Where? How to make sure Sophia heard the truth. There were no easy answers, but the act of planning felt like reclaiming a piece of my power. Angela leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table. "The wedding's at St. Mary's Cathedral, right? That's big, public, lots of eyes. Perfect." I swallowed. "Perfect for what?" "For making sure his lies unravel in front of everyone." Her eyes gleamed. "We don't just tell Sophia privately. We tell everyone." The thought terrified me. The idea of standing up in a cathedral full of strangers, facing Brian's smug smirk and Sophia's heartbreak, it made my stomach churn. But at the same time, it thrilled me. Because if Brian's cruelty had taught me anything, it was that silence only served him. And I was done being silent. As midnight crept closer, Angela pulled me into a hug before leaving. "Get some rest," she murmured. "Tomorrow we plan for real, and the day after, he learns what consequences feel like." When the door shut behind her, I stood alone in my studio, staring at the invitation once more. My reflection glimmered faintly in the glass of the window, superimposed over the city lights outside. I barely recognized myself. Eyes rimmed red, face drawn, shoulders sagging. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something new. Steel. Brian had called me convenient, disposable, small. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my blinds, bright and accusing. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but exhaustion didn't matter anymore. A strange clarity filled me, sharp and unyielding. I wasn't just Elara, the discarded girlfriend. I was Elara, the woman who was about to take her life back. Angela arrived early, balancing a tray of coffees and a bag of pastries. She looked like she hadn't slept either, but her eyes gleamed with determination. "Eat," she ordered, plopping the food down. "Revenge requires carbs." Despite myself, a laugh slipped out. It was shaky, small, but it was the first time I'd laughed in days. We spread notebooks, pens, and my laptop across the tiny kitchen table. Angela pulled up pictures of St. Mary's Cathedral online, scrolling through images of its soaring spires and cavernous interior. "It'll be packed," she murmured. "Sophia's family is loaded, high society types, lawyers, investors, hotel moguls, the kind of people who'll do anything to avoid scandal, which means Brian is counting on silence to protect him." "Then we don't give him silence," I said. My voice wavered at first, but steadied. "We give him exposure." Angela grinned. "Now you're talking." By noon, Clayton showed up, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence filling my tiny apartment. He hugged me tightly, almost lifting me off the ground. "You okay, sis?" "No," I admitted, "but I will be." He stepped back, his jaw tightening. "Good, because I swear, if that bastard so much as breathes in your direction, I'll—" "You'll stay calm," Angela interrupted, pointing a finger at him. "We don't need fists. We need strategy." Clayton muttered something under his breath, but nodded. He dropped onto a chair and scanned the cathedral layout Angela had pulled up. "So, what's the plan?" "That's what we're figuring out," I said, chewing my lip. "We can't just barge in and shout. We need to make sure people believe us. That Sophia believes me." Angela tapped the table. "Photos, texts, proof. You said you still have them, right?" I nodded. My phone was full of selfies Brian and I had taken. His arms wrapped around me, his smile confident, his apartment in the background. There were hundreds of texts, too. "Can you pick up groceries? Dinner at 7? Miss you, babe." I opened the gallery and began scrolling. The pictures felt like daggers now, but they were also weapons. "This is enough?" I asked softly. "More than enough," Angela said firmly. Clayton leaned back, crossing his arms. "So we show the proof. Make a scene. That's it?" "It has to be more than that," I said. The thought of confronting Brian in front of everyone made my stomach knot, but hiding wasn't an option anymore. "He's slippery. He'll deny, twist, make me sound like a jealous ex. I need to make it undeniable." Angela's eyes lit up. "Then we make it public, loud, visible. We don't just show Sophia, we show the entire congregation, the pictures, the texts, the whole rotten truth." The idea made my pulse race, terrifying, but powerful. That afternoon, Stephanie arrived with her boyfriend, Mike. She was my cousin, sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal, and unafraid of confrontation. She hugged me hard, then sat cross-legged on the floor. "All right," she said briskly. "Tell me where I need to be, and I'll be there." Mike, quieter but steady, nodded. "Same." As the 5 of us huddled in my cramped living room, something shifted. The despair that had suffocated me turned into purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about justice, about making sure Brian couldn't destroy another life the way he had destroyed mine. Still, doubts gnawed at me. When the others left to grab dinner, I found myself staring at the invitation again. Sophia's name glowed in elegant gold lettering. Sophia Elizabeth Hartwell. What did she know? Had Brian lied to her the way he lied to me? Or was she complicit, willing to ignore the truth for the sake of status and wealth? I imagined her face when she found out. Would she hate me? Pity me? Would she even believe me? I wrapped my arms around myself, whispering into the silence, "I'm not doing this to ruin her life. I'm doing this to save it." The next day, preparations began in earnest. Angela dragged me to a boutique to find a dress. "You need to blend in," she insisted, pulling gown after gown off the racks. "If you look out of place, they'll dismiss you before you open your mouth." I ended up with a navy blue sheath dress, simple but elegant, modest enough for a church, sharp enough to command attention. When I tried it on, Angela clasped her hands together dramatically. "Yes, that's the one. Brian will choke when he sees you in it. I smoothed the fabric down, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked different, stronger, like someone preparing for battle rather than heartbreak. You know, Angela said softly, meeting my gaze in the mirror, this isn't just about him anymore. It's about you, taking back your power. Her words stayed with me. That night, we met again, this time at Clayton's apartment, which had more space to spread out. Maps of the cathedral lay on the coffee table, along with the printed photos Angela had convinced me to pull from my phone. Seeing them on glossy paper was like twisting the knife deeper. Brian's arm around me, his smile casual, his lips pressed to my forehead. Moments I had once treasured now turned into ammunition. Clayton jabbed a finger at the layout. Steph and Mike will get there early, blend in, and save seats near the back. Angela and I go in with Elara. When the ceremony starts, she stands. We back her up. And if Brian tries to shut her down, Stephanie asked. Angela smirked. He won't. Not when we've got photos and half the congregation filming on their phones. The second he opens his mouth, the internet will eat him alive. Clayton's grin was grim. Perfect. I tried to match their confidence, but fear gnawed at my insides. What if Brian twisted it all? What if Sophia turned on me? What if I ended up humiliated, laughed out of the cathedral like some bitter ex-girlfriend? As if sensing my thoughts, Angela squeezed my shoulder. Hey, listen to me. You're not the villain here. You're the truth teller, and truth is the one thing he can't control. Her words steadied me. When everyone finally left that night, I sat alone with the dress draped over a chair, the photos stacked neatly on the table. Tomorrow, everything would change. I walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brian was probably sipping expensive whiskey at his bachelor party, smug and certain that his future was untouchable. He had no idea what was coming. I whispered into the night, almost like a vow. You thought I was convenient. You thought I'd stay silent, but I'm done being silent. The storm was gathering, and this time it was going to break over him. The day of the wedding dawned cold and gray, the October sky heavy with low clouds that looked ready to burst. I stood at my window, staring out at the city as though it were holding its breath with me. Today was the day, Brian's day. But it was also mine. Angela arrived at 9 sharp, carrying a garment bag and the kind of determined expression that brooked no argument. Time to suit up, she announced, setting the bag down with a flourish. Inside was the navy sheath dress we'd chosen, freshly pressed. My hands shook as I pulled it on, smoothing the fabric down over my body. You look like someone who can burn down cathedrals with just a look, Angela said, adjusting my hair into a sleek bun. That man won't know what hit him. Clayton showed up not long after, awkward in a borrowed suit, but standing tall. He looked me up and down, his eyes softening with brotherly pride. You're stronger than you think, sis. I wished I felt as strong as they believed I was. Inside, my stomach twisted into knots so tight I could barely breathe. But there was no turning back. By early afternoon, we sat parked across the street from St. Mary's Cathedral, its Gothic spires piercing the gray sky like jagged knives. The building looked both magnificent and foreboding, its stained glass windows glowing faintly with colored light. Guests arrived in a steady stream, stepping out of luxury cars, sleek black sedans, gleaming Teslas, even a white Bentley that drew curious stares. Women in elegant gowns swept up the steps, their laughter floating through the damp air. Men in tailored suits followed, shaking hands, adjusting cufflinks. These were Brian's people, the world he had never let me see. Beside me in the car, Angela reached over and squeezed my hand. Breathe. Remember why you're here. On my other side, Clayton adjusted his tie, his jaw clenched. He won't hurt you again, he muttered. Not while I'm here. At 1:45, the cathedral's great wooden doors opened wider. The string quartet inside began to play, notes of soft chamber music drifting out into the street. Then I saw her. Sophia Elizabeth Hartwell stepped gracefully from the white Rolls-Royce that had just pulled up. Even from across the street, she was dazzling. Her wedding gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace that shimmered with each step. Her veil trailed behind her like a cloud, and her smile was radiant as she waved to the photographers clustered at the bottom of the steps. She looked so young, younger than I had imagined. Joy radiated from her face, pure and unguarded. My chest tightened painfully. She had no idea. For a heartbeat, doubt flooded me. Could I really do this? Could I shatter her world in front of everyone she loved? Then Brian's words echoed in my memory, sharp as broken glass. You're the kind of woman a man like me keeps around until he finds someone better. My hands curled into fists. Yes, I could do this. I had to. It's time, I whispered. Inside, the cathedral was breathtaking. High vaulted ceilings arched overhead, painted with saints and angels. Stained glass windows bathed the stone floor in pools of red, blue, and gold. White roses and pale peonies adorned every column, their fragrance thick in the air. The pews were packed with guests and finery, their voices a low murmur that buzzed like bees in a hive. At the altar, Brian stood in a tailored black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, his posture confident. He looked every inch the successful groom. My chest burned as I watched him laugh with one of his groomsmen, as though nothing weighed on his conscience, as though I had never existed. Angela and Clayton flanked me as we slid into a pew near the back. Stephanie and Mike were already in place across the aisle, their eyes sharp, ready. The music shifted. Bridesmaids glided down the aisle in pale pink dresses, followed by flower girls scattering rose petals. Then, as the organ swelled, the guests rose to their feet. All eyes turned toward the back of the cathedral. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her father at her side. Her face glowed with joy, her veil floating like a halo. Guests sighed in admiration, cameras flashed. She began her slow walk down the aisle, every step measured, graceful. I rose to my feet too, but not in admiration. My knees trembled, but my voice rang out steady and clear. Excuse me. The music faltered. The organ fell silent. A ripple of confusion spread through the congregation as heads turned in my direction. Sophia froze halfway down the aisle, her brow furrowed as she searched for the source of the interruption. At the altar, Brian's face drained of color. For the first time in 4 years, I saw fear in his eyes. I stepped into the aisle, my heels clicking against the stone floor. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying across the hushed cathedral. "But before this ceremony continues, there's something everyone needs to know." "Security!" Brian barked, his voice cracking. But the elderly ushers near the back looked bewildered, hesitant. I lifted my chin, clutching my phone in one hand. "My name is Elara Monroe, and for the past 4 years, I've been living with the groom." Gasps erupted from the pews. A murmur of shock rippled like wildfire through the congregation. Sophia's bouquet slipped from her fingers, white roses scattering across the aisle. Her father's face went crimson, his jaw tightening. Brian lunged forward, his voice sharp. "That's a lie. She's a crazy ex." "Is it?" My voice cut through his denial. I unlocked my phone and held it up, displaying a photo of Brian and me in his kitchen, his arms wrapped around me, both of us smiling. This was last month, at his apartment. The same apartment where I've cooked his meals, done his laundry, and slept beside him for 4 years. Whispers swelled, guests craned their necks to see, phones lifted as people began recording. I turned to Sophia, who stood frozen, her veil trembling from her uneven breaths. "He promised me marriage. He gave me a ring, and 2 days ago, I found this under his bed." My voice broke, but I held up the wedding invitation like evidence at a trial. "Your invitation. Hidden like a secret he never meant me to see." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no." Her bridesmaids rushed to steady her, their pink dresses a blur around her pale face. I faced the guests again, my voice stronger now, fueled by 4 years of betrayal. "Do you want to know what he said when I confronted him? He said I wasn't good enough, that I was convenient, that I was the kind of woman a man like him keeps around until he finds someone better." Gasps. Angry mutters. Someone near the front stood, shaking their head in disgust. The sound of phones clicking grew louder. Photographs, videos, proof. Brian's mask cracked. His eyes blazed as he pointed at me, his voice desperate. "She's lying! She's trying to ruin me!" But the evidence was there, glowing on my phone, undeniable, and more than that, the truth was written all over his face. Sophia's knees buckled. Her father caught her as she whispered again, louder this time. "Is it true?" The cathedral had fallen into complete silence. Every guest leaned forward, waiting. All eyes were on Brian, and for the first time, he had no script to follow. The silence inside the cathedral was suffocating. Sophia's whisper still lingered in the air like smoke. "Is it true?" She was staring at Brian, her eyes wide, her whole body trembling under the weight of betrayal. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for his response. Brian stood frozen at the altar, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. His perfectly tailored tuxedo suddenly looked like a costume, his polished confidence unraveling thread by thread. "Tell me it's not true," Sophia begged, her voice cracking. "Tell me she's lying." But Brian couldn't speak, and the silence screamed louder than any denial. Finally, her father's voice thundered through the cathedral, breaking the stillness. "Explain yourself, Hendricks, right now." Brian's face contorted. "Mr. Hartwell, please, don't listen to her. She's nothing. A pathetic ex who can't accept it's over. She's obsessed. She's telling the truth." The voice came from the back of the cathedral. Clear, cold, feminine. Every head turned. A woman stepped through the doorway, her heels clicking against the stone floor with deliberate grace. Silver hair framed her face, elegantly styled, and a string of pearls gleamed at her throat. Her posture radiated authority, her presence commanding the kind of respect that silenced even the whispers of gossip-hungry guests. My stomach lurched. I had never met her, though I had imagined her countless times. Brian's mother. "Mother," Brian stammered, his voice cracking like a boy caught in a lie. His face turned ashen. What are you doing here?" She walked down the aisle with steady steps, her eyes fixed on her son. When she reached the front, she didn't even look at me. Her gaze was locked on Brian, sharp and unyielding. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks," she said. Her voice was low but carried effortlessly across the hushed congregation. "Ever since I read about this wedding in the society pages." "My mother, please." She cut him off with a single look. Then she turned to Sophia, her expression softening just slightly. "My dear, I am so sorry. You deserve none of this. But yes, everything this young woman has said is true." Gasps erupted. Someone dropped a hymnal, the thud echoing. Sophia's face crumpled. Her knees buckled again, and her father caught her by the shoulders. "No!" Brian lunged forward, his hands shaking. "Don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about." His mother's voice was like steel. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to twist this. I've seen the pictures. I've seen the texts. I knew you were hiding her. You were always careful, never tagging her, never saying her name publicly, but I noticed. I always notice." Brian's mask shattered completely, his lips curled, desperate, angry. "Why would you humiliate me like this, here, today?" "Because humiliation is the least of what you deserve." Her voice cracked, not with weakness, but with pain. "You've lied to everyone, Brian. To this poor girl," she gestured toward Sophia, "to her family, to me. You've been stringing women along like they're playthings, promising futures you never intended to give." Her eyes glistened, but her tone remained icy. "You're exactly like your father." The words struck him like a slap. He staggered back, his hand gripping the altar rail for balance. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged glances, some shocked, some satisfied, others already pulling out their phones to capture every word. Mrs. Hendricks turned back to the congregation, straightening her shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for this spectacle, but I can no longer remain silent. My son has not only betrayed the women in his life, but he has also betrayed his colleagues, his clients, and me." A chill raced down my spine. What was she about to do? From her purse, she drew a thick manila envelope and set it on the altar with a sharp thud. "For the past month, I've had him investigated. I noticed inconsistencies, money missing from my accounts, reports that didn't add up. And what I found?" Her voice faltered for just a moment before hardening again. "What I found was theft, embezzlement, fraud." The cathedral erupted in shocked exclamations. People leaned out of pews, whispering furiously, phones snapping photos. Brian's face turned chalk white. "Mother, stop! You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice sliced through his. "You've been stealing from your company. You've been forging expense reports, skimming client accounts, funneling money into maintaining this ridiculous lifestyle. You even siphoned from my personal funds when you thought I wouldn't notice." Sophia's father stormed down the aisle, his face thunderous. "Is this true?" "Of course not," Brian shouted. "It's a lie. She's lying. They're both—" "Lying?" His mother's laugh was bitter. "Brian, I've already turned the evidence over to the authorities." As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air. They grew louder, closer, until the blue and red flash of police lights danced against the stained glass. Panic rippled through the guests. Some scrambled to their feet, whispering frantically. Others simply stared, riveted by the unfolding disaster. Brian looked around wildly, his composure gone. You called the police on your own son? I called them on a criminal, she said coldly. The fact that he's my son is irrelevant. Actions have consequences, Brian, something you've spent your life avoiding. No, he muttered, shaking his head like a trapped animal. No, no, no. He turned desperately toward Sophia. Darling, listen to me. They're twisting everything. You know me. You know I love you. Tell them. Tell them you believe me. Sophia lifted her veil with trembling hands. Her makeup was ruined, streaks of mascara running down her cheeks. But her eyes, oh, her eyes were sharper than blades now. Tell them? She repeated, her voice trembling but clear. She stepped closer to him, her gown rustling across the scattered rose petals. Tell them what, Brian? That I want to marry a liar, a thief? That I want to spend my life with a man who's been living with another woman while planning a wedding with me? Please, Sophia. Did you ever love me? She cut him off, her voice rising, her chest heaving. Or was I just another convenient arrangement like she was? She pointed at me. The entire cathedral went silent again, waiting. Brian opened his mouth, but no words came. The answer was written all over his face. Sophia nodded slowly, as though confirming something she had already suspected. Then, with a suddenness that shocked everyone, her hand flew through the air and struck his cheek. The slap echoed like a gunshot. That's for her, she hissed, pointing at me. Before Brian could react, her hand whipped across his face again, harder this time. He stumbled backward, his cheek flaming red. And that's for me. The cathedral roared with whispers, gasps, and murmurs. Some guests clapped. Others simply shook their heads in stunned silence. At that moment, the cathedral doors burst open. Police officers strode in, their presence turning the sacred hall into a crime scene. Brian's fate was sealed. The cathedral doors slammed against the stone walls as uniformed officers streamed in, their boots striking the marble floor with chilling finality. The flashing red and blue lights spilled across the pews, staining white roses and pink bridesmaid dresses in ominous color. Brian Pedro Hendricks, the lead officer's voice boomed, calm but unyielding. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Put your hands where we can see them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher, recording every second of Brian's fall from grace. The man who had once strutted through life with unchecked arrogance now looked cornered, his shoulders tense, his eyes wild as they darted around the sanctuary, searching desperately for an escape. This is insane, he shouted, his voice cracking. You can't do this here, not now. This is my wedding. Your wedding? Sophia's voice rang out like a whip. She stood tall now, her veil pulled back, her face streaked with tears but glowing with fierce dignity. No, Brian. This was never a wedding. This was a con, a show, a lie, just like you. The officers advanced, pulling handcuffs from their belts. Brian stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the altar rail. He raised his hands, but not in surrender, in panic. Listen to me, he yelled, spinning to the guests. She's lying. They're all lying. This is some conspiracy. My mother, that girl. He jabbed a finger toward me, his face twisted with desperation. She's obsessed. She's jealous. She's trying to ruin me because I left her. Dozens of eyes turned to me. For the first time, I didn't shrink beneath the weight of their scrutiny. I met their stares with my chin high, my phone still glowing in my hand, evidence plain for all to see. No, Brian, I said, my voice strong, steady. I'm not ruining you. You did that yourself. The officer seized his arm, snapping cold steel around his wrist. Brian jerked violently, shouting, Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? Yes, the officer said flatly, forcing his other arm behind his back. You're a criminal, and you have the right to remain silent. The click of the cuffs echoed through the cathedral like the tolling of a bell. Guests began to rise from their pews, their whispers turning to open chatter. Some looked horrified, others gleeful, already composing scandalous stories for their friends. Sophia's father wrapped an arm protectively around his daughter, shielding her from prying eyes. Mrs. Hendricks stood straighter than ever, her pearls gleaming under the stained glass light. Take him, she instructed coolly, as though she commanded the entire operation. Brian twisted his neck to look at her, his face contorted with betrayal. You called them. You did this to me. She didn't flinch. No, Brian, you did this to yourself. I only stopped pretending not to see it. His voice cracked into a plea. Mother, please, don't let them do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Please. Her eyes glistened, but her expression remained resolute. Better in front of everyone than never at all. The officers hauled him toward the doors, his polished shoes scraping against the marble as he tried to resist. His once proud posture was gone, replaced by frantic thrashing and pitiful shouts. "Stop filming! Stop looking at me! You're all nothing, do you hear me? Nothing!" His words rang hollow, the desperate cries of a man watching his empire crumble. The heavy doors closed behind him with a resonant thud, leaving the cathedral heavy with the aftermath. For a long moment, no one moved. The scent of roses hung cloying in the silence, mingled with the faint metallic tang of fear. Then Sophia turned. Her gaze landed on me. I froze. Up close, she looked younger than I had expected, fragile, almost breakable, beneath the weight of lace and silk. Her lips trembled, her mascara smeared, but her eyes held a sharp clarity that cut straight through me. She stepped closer, her gown rustling softly. Her voice was quiet but carried. "You said 4 years?" I nodded, my throat thick. 4 years. Her hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. She shook her head in disbelief. 4 years of your life, and I nearly gave him mine. Tears welled in my eyes. I wanted to hate her, to resent her wealth and her place in the world Brian had always claimed I didn't belong to. But all I saw was another woman gutted by the same man, another soul dragged through the fire of his lies. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice broke. "I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to ruin your day, but you deserve to know." Her hand dropped and she reached out, gripping mine tightly. Her palm was cold, trembling. "You didn't ruin my day. You saved my life." The words lodged in my chest like a stone, heavy and healing all at once. Behind us, Angela exhaled a long, shaky breath. Clayton's hand clapped gently against my shoulder, grounding me. Stephanie's eyes glistened, her usual sharp tongue silenced by the moment's weight. For the first time since finding that cursed invitation, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. Sophia's father cleared his throat, his voice gruff but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony is over. I apologize for the disruption. Please, go." The crowd obeyed, shuffling out in waves of murmured speculation. Some shot me sympathetic glances, others looks of judgment, but none of it mattered, not anymore. When the last of the guests had gone, Sophia still held my hand. She studied me for a long moment, her lips quivering into something like a smile through her tears. "We both lost something today," she said softly, "but maybe we gained something too." "What's that?" I asked. "The truth." Her voice cracked on the word, but there was steel beneath it. Outside, the sirens faded into the distance, carrying Brian with them. Inside, the cathedral echoed with emptiness. Scattered rose petals lay across the floor, forgotten programs littered the pews, and the altar, once prepared for vows, now stood as the stage of his downfall. I looked around at the wreckage of what had been meant to be the most perfect day of his carefully constructed life. Instead, it had been the beginning of his end. And for the first time in years, I felt the faint, trembling edges of freedom. 6 months later, I stood behind the counter at Moonbeam Coffee, but everything was different now. The cafe's walls were painted a soft sage green, sunlight slanting through wide windows onto cozy tables we'd brought in secondhand, but polished until they gleamed. Angela and I had pulled our savings together, bought the place from the old owner, and poured ourselves into remaking it into something warm, welcoming, and ours. Every morning I baked pastries, lemon muffins, cinnamon twists, little almond croissants that sold out before noon. Every evening the air hummed with the chatter of regulars, the scrape of chairs, the comforting buzz of community. This was my kingdom now, built not on someone else's promises but on my own effort. And the sweetness of that reality was something no betrayal could ever steal. The bell over the door chimed, and I glanced up from the espresso machine. My heart lifted. Sophia stepped inside. Her hair was cut shorter now, styled into a chic bob that made her look even younger, freer. She wore jeans and a cream sweater, simple but elegant, and her face carried a peace I hadn't seen the day of the wedding. "The usual?" I asked, already reaching for a lavender latte cup. "Make it 2, she said, smiling. "I have news." Curiosity tugged at me. I poured her drinks, then joined her at our usual table by the window. The trees outside were just beginning to bud, small green leaves unfurling in the spring air. She set her cup down, her eyes bright. "I got the job." My breath caught. "The nonprofit?" She nodded, grinning. "Environmental conservation in Portland. I start next month." I clasped her hand. genuine joy swelling inside me. Sophia, that's incredible. You're going to love it there. Her gaze softened. I think so. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something because I want it, not because my family expects it, not because some man convinces me it's right. Just me. I squeezed her hand. Then it's perfect. We sipped our lattes in comfortable silence, and my mind drifted back to the cathedral, to the chaos of that day. I could still hear the echo of her slap against Brian's cheek, the gasp of the crowd, the wail of sirens. Brian. He'd been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Fraud, embezzlement, theft. His own mother had testified against him, her words cold, steady, damning. I'd gone to the trial once, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching him squirm under the weight of evidence. There had been no charm left in him, no silver tongue to escape the truth, just a man finally trapped by the lies he had spun too long. His mother had approached me after the sentencing. Her elegant facade looked older, more fragile, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry for what my son did to you," she said quietly. "You deserve better." I had only nodded. What else could I say? Her son had destroyed me, and, in doing so, had also destroyed himself. Sophia's voice pulled me back to the present. "What about you? Any news?" I grinned. "Actually, yes. The loan came through. Angela and I are opening a second location downtown." Her eyes widened with delight. "Elara, that's amazing!" I laughed, unable to hide my pride. It still doesn't feel real, but it's happening. Bigger space, more room for music nights, maybe even a small bakery section. It's everything I dreamed of. Everything I never let myself dream while I was waiting for Brian to choose me. Her smile was warm, sincere. "I'm proud of you. You built this yourself. You didn't let him take everything from you." The words hit me deep, because for months I had believed he had taken everything. My time, my trust, my self-worth. But here I was, whole again, not because he had left me, but because I had finally chosen myself. Later, as we hugged goodbye, Sophia whispered, "Keep in touch, and if you ever want to visit Portland, I'll have a couch waiting for you." "Deal," I said, holding her tighter than I'd meant to. Because whatever else Brian had destroyed, he had accidentally created this, a bond between two women who might otherwise never have met. When she left, Angela breezed in with her arms full of flowers from the farmer's market. She dumped them on the counter, petals scattering, her grin wide. "So, boss," she said teasingly, "where do you want the tulips?" I laughed, catching one bloom before it fell. "Front counter. Let people see them when they walk in." She winked. "On it. Oh, and congratulations, partner. We did it." We arranged the flowers together, laughter bubbling between us, petals dotting the floor. The cafe filled with light and scent, alive with the hum of voices and the rich aroma of coffee. I paused, looking around at everything we had built. 6 months ago, I had been broken, sobbing on the floor of my studio apartment, clutching a wedding invitation that had spelled out the end of my world. Now I was standing in a cafe that belonged to me, surrounded by friends, filled with laughter, plans, hope. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Clayton. "Proud of you, sis. Mom and Dad would be too." I blinked back sudden tears, smiling at the screen. My parents were long gone, but I felt them now, in the strength I'd found, in the independence they'd raised me to value. I had forgotten those lessons when I was with Brian, blinded by his promises, but I remembered them now. As the evening rush began, I caught my reflection in the cafe window. For a moment, I saw the woman I had been 6 months ago, hollow-eyed, broken, convinced her worth depended on a man's approval. But then the reflection shifted, and I saw who I was now, stronger, steadier, smiling. A woman who had built her own life, a woman who had chosen herself. Brian had thought I was the kind of woman a man like him keeps, until he finds someone better. He was wrong. I was the kind of woman who walked away, who rebuilt, who rose from ashes brighter than before. And that, I realized with a deep, steady breath, was the best revenge of all.